One of the most frequent things we get asked is why we don't make more stuff in the UK, or even in quite a more accusatory tone, why don't you make everything in the UK? Now, when we started the business, we actually intended on making all of our stuff not in the UK but in France, a company called Made in Lecoin. Now, those guys, you might remember them from making the production Privé Shan 5 prototype. Amazing guys doing what they do. They used to work for Commensal and Sun, two brands I hold in quite high esteem from my younger riding years. But we could never really get our schedule to meet up, and also that we were such a small brand in that we didn't really even exist at that point properly, that we just couldn't get it going. So we went with Brian at Downland Cycles onshore, because it was kind of we could also have a bit more of a hands-on learning experience with someone that was, you know, a master frame builder, so we could do that. At this point in the industry, we were incredibly naive, and a lot of the time we misread a lot of branding in the UK of companies as, you know, where there are UK based companies, it says designed in the UK or built in the UK, and thought that meant that they actually made the products themselves here, which it turns out to not be the case at all. Built can just mean assembled, so the frames themselves are made in Taiwan or whatever, and then they're put together here. So we're a bit naive about that when we started out. Regardless, even once we'd found that out ourselves, we thought, well, I'm sure that we could do it. Now, I have a background in lean manufacturing, so I understand the challenges of making something to a budget. And a lot of the time I felt that we could probably overcome those problems if only we were smart about how we did it. The biggest problem was never really cost, which is what I expected it to be, but more of a skill shortage. And not saying that we can't do it in the UK, but that it was incredibly difficult to. Now, on the last project we've worked on, we approached around 10 vendors in the UK about making stuff for us. Now, before, you know, we skip forward and go, well, why don't you just make it yourself? The restrictions in place for that are quite severe as well. Now, we live in a quite expensive part of the UK, south of London on the coast, so it's quite an expensive, you know, place to live, and there's very few places you could set up manufacturing. In fact, I think both Berth and Tam are locally from here, but they moved away to work. Now, I don't know if that was their reason that they did it, but we have kids in school here, and, you know, we can't just up and leave and start a manufacturing facility somewhere in the country where it's more responsible pricing for us. And also we found that the local council really didn't want to support us doing light industry here at all. That's not the kind of business they want in Sussex, it seems. So we approached around 10 vendors in the country, and the communication at best was patchy. But people were either too busy. If they were good, they were too busy doing jobs to do a job for us which was small, or they couldn't manage what we were doing. They didn't have the capability to do it. And we found that really strange, and we're going in circles. But mostly talking to people, we found out that really the problem with the bicycle industry is the volumes are very low and the quality needs to be very high. So you want aerospace equipment and exotic materials at the price of bicycle parts. Now, they can do that in Asia because they have mass scale. That's definitely one of the frustrating points. On top of that is the marketing has been so good of many companies that people don't really know what happens where and what goes on. So when you make a product in the UK, the raw materials cost a lot, the labour costs a lot, and everything else costs a lot. We spent around £600 with our Narcissist frames just getting them places in the supply chain. You know, so once the frame has been made, it needs to go away to be painted. and once it's been painted, it needs to come back and be checked and boxed, and then those boxes needs to go out and be, you know, and the money for that adds up so quickly, you know, that it's one of those things that you just like ghost taxes you, if that's a thing. So that's one of the considerations of that, is that everything in the UK adds up so quickly. Now, if you are a smaller company, and there's a few small companies in the UK who specialise in boutique bikes, where you can give a service that you are fitting something to someone, or you can, you know, take out their boutique desires, then I think you could just about run it. But we never had aspirations to be a very, very small producer. We wanted to scale up production in the UK, and we had these very, you know, grandiose ideas about it. And on top of that, you know, the British cycling industry is worth way more than even the British steel industry, but the government loves investing in the steel industry. But I think it's telling that Trillian Bikes, owned by the Liberty Group, owned by Tata Steel, still use Reynolds tubing. So that's how confusing it is. Even when you own a steel company, you need to buy cycle tubing from someone else. Correct me if I'm wrong. I might be wrong on that. But there is definitely, you know, there's a trend of boutique and artisan builders here, and that's really good, but that's not what we want to do. We do and are trying to change things, and we are trying to do it, and I think that if we had the opportunity and we could make one to actually set up somewhere manufacturing here, we would. But at the moment, how are we going to pay for it? It's really, really difficult. When we sell the Narcissist frames now, which are hand built by Brian at Downland, people are like, why the hell is this over £1,000 for a hardtail frame? I can buy a British built hardtail frame for like £200 or £300. It's like, they're not. It's just that's a British company, so it's kind of really hard to break that cycle. And I don't even think it's deceptive marketing so much as people just don't know, or they just don't care. And it's a hard sale to tell someone that you know, it costs more because it was made here. But that's one of the reasons we do. The other thing is, people that are capable of making stuff for us are generally busy with other things as well. So Paul from Rideworks will do prototype stuff for us as long as he's not super busy with other stuff. And of course, he's pretty much always super busy with other stuff, and he has to be a gentleman and push that aside to help us out with a stupid chainring or idler cog or something that we really need, and he'll do that for us. But that's not how we could run a business long term. The only way we could really do it is buying CNC machines, buying in volume of tubing, and I mean volume, like loads, getting people to work and training people to do it. So getting apprentices in, getting skilled frame builders in, setting up jigs, and you're starting thinking already at the cost of that. And then, I mean, there's going to be a lead time until you can even sell your first frames. So unless someone out there wants to come to me now and be like, yeah, do you know what, here is £500,000 or whatever, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. However, it is part of the business going forward that we'd like to do some of the manufacturing in the UK and continue to do so. But that's only if people pay for it. And that Made in Britain sigil is not really worth what it used to be, sadly. You know, and the companies that do manage to do it still, like Hope, have been established a really long time. So we're either, you know, we're too new in the game to even know how to do it at the moment. And remember that we're riders designing bikes for us. We're not businessmen. We don't have this kind of acumen. So as we learn, we might get better at it, but we're still young in the game. So that's really why at the moment we can't hold up the whole British industry like people would like us to. But believe us, we'd like to do it ourselves. If you have any more questions on this, I'm totally and utterly happy to answer them. But as you can see, it's frustrating for us, because why shouldn't you build where you live and be restricted? Question for another time. Thanks for listening today.